Hi guys. Sorry I haven't done a video for a while. I've been spending a lot of time on music recently. Been really getting back into it and enjoying it a lot, and that has taken up a lot of my free time. And also, if I'm being honest, I got Football Manager 2022, which was a huge mistake because I can't stop playing it. When I first got it, I was like, this is boring. I don't enjoy it. I don't know why I used to enjoy this game. This is stupid. This is just stressful. It's just management, It's like having another job. And then I got a few games into the season and taken up a lot of what would have been probably Big Dome time. Anyway, so I wanted to do a video about why I stopped taking acid. Just about the sort of some of the experiences I had on it in general. Just make sure this is recording. Yeah, cool. I found acid really fun at times, but also pretty frightening and weird, in a way that I haven't found many other psychedelics to be. There was something specifically kind of sinister about it. Sometimes I would say, not sinister, unnerving, unsettling. There's not a word for it. There's not a word to describe it. There really isn't. It felt like it was often bringing to the forefront fears I didn't know I had, and exacerbating them to the point where they were like here, normally you've got, fear in the kind of peripheries of your mind, and you feel it even when you feel quite stressed out and afraid. It's kind of here, and it was like on acid, it was like here. It was like as close as it could possibly be. The fear closed in as much as it possibly could, and in a sense, this was a really good experience. Like on many occasions, it was anyway. Like I would get this fear. Like often, it would just be like something terrible is about to happen. It was like someone's gonna kill me, or like someone's gonna burst in, or like something really, really, really bad is about to happen, or something really bad is already kind of happening, and I'm too like sort of fucked up and confused to be aware of it, and like something is really wrong. And there's like a real sense of dread, but a kind of disturbing, sick joke kind of sense of dread, It was like weird, and a feeling of guilt, and a feeling of just a bad feeling. And this would rise and rise and rise, and like I said, it would get to the point where it was like unavoidable. It just consumed me, and I would just have to sit still and just allow this feeling to just rise up. And the ways in which that was good, well, I would, because it would get to a point where it's so bad where I just have to like accept it. I'd let go and be like, I can't control this. And which is, I think, a very, very important tendency to have when you take psychedelic drugs. Just maybe sometimes in life in general, it depends what you're experiencing. Obviously, sometimes it's good to try and like retain control, but a situation like that, you can't control really, like, whether or not you're going to have like a good trip, and to try and do so, generally speaking, seems to be a bad idea. So I would kind of just sit there and let it happen, and then it would reach that peak, and then I'd be like, okay, cool, maybe I'm about to die. Like, maybe the most terrifying thing ever is about to happen. Maybe all my horrible feelings about myself are true. Maybe I'm like terrible. Like I would often have, some of it is too weird to go into, to tell you the truth, but I would see myself in a light that was like awful. Like I was like a villain. I was like the worst person ever. And like I was like a lot of really bad things that I'm not. And I would just accept it and be like, okay. And then there was a kind of, after some time, that would fade into a kind of feeling of euphoria, because it was like, all right, well, like I've kind of embraced all those possibilities, and fine. And now there's nothing left to do but just like try and enjoy the space that you're in. It leaves you no room for procrastinating or dismissing your fears or hiding from them. You just basically fully accept them, or at least in my experience, I would fully accept them and then move on. There's nothing else I could do. There was no room to do anything else. So in that sense, I found it to be quite positive sometimes. However, the stress of all of that was quite intense. And yeah, it's yeah, I don't know. I wasn't hugely keen on it. Like, I liked that it lasted for hours, and often the beginning was really fun and the end was really fun. It was the middle part that I had a big issue with, and the middle part that was very stressful. And I don't want to be I don't want to. I'm not even pointing fingers. I'm past that point with this, and I'm past the point of like being, I don't know, annoyed about it or anything else. Like, however, the person I used to take acid with regularly was not in the same mindset, I would say, as me, and probably did not have, well, definitely, in fairness, did not have an adequate level of respect for the drug and the effects that it has, and that caused a lot of problems for both of us. And yeah, I didn't really like taking it that often, and certainly that component to our trips didn't really help. And so it meant that sometimes something that might have been a beneficial experience of like internal discomfort and fear would become a chaotic experience that kind of felt like it spilled out into the real world, not just your kind of internal world, but it spilled out into stuff that was going on in our lives, you know. And I didn't want that at all. And that is, I think, what a truly bad trip is, because a normal, you know, bad trip, if it's just horrible and frightening, who gives a shit? Like, you know, you can handle that. It's like going on a roller coaster, as long as you're fine when you come back, and as long as it doesn't interact with the real world. You're not like dealing with family members or going out into the street and being psychotic or getting into trouble or doing something that you really regret. As long as you're just having a bad experience in your own head, and then when that goes, you're fine, or often better than you were before, then it's not really a bad trip, you know. It's a difficult trip, but a beneficial one. But some of these became kind of bad trips, I guess, and, you know, sort of come around and be looking at the apartment, and it was like everything was like fucked up, and like we had been like crazy in a bad way, you know, like in a stressful way that made you feel uncomfortable for days afterwards, and made you worry about like, did people hear that, and what were we doing, and where were we, and how badly could that have gone, you know. So there was a lot of that for years. However, also extremely funny experiences, like really funny, creatively funny experiences where like we would just make each other and ourselves, and occasionally someone else, if we were doing it with them, like laugh, like to the point of just like floods of tears, like kind of just the most fun, the most joyous experience you could possibly have. But that was amazing. Because you can't really put a price on that. I think that's like, to me, like what life is about. But it could very quickly get weird, and in ways that were very uncomfortable. Like, it was hard to deal with things socially. If it would be joking around and then a topic would come up that was maybe uncomfortable, the atmosphere would become very bad in an instant, or it could become very bad in an instant, and everything suddenly was like, oh, you know, and it was a bit chilling, and it was very difficult to communicate serious things. So maybe, for example, you might accidentally say something to somebody on it. Like, you might make a joke, and then it sounds like maybe you're saying something terrible about that person, but you don't really know how to communicate that you didn't mean it like that. And you try to tell them that it was a joke, and then it sounds like you're angry at them for taking it seriously, when actually you're trying to be nice and you're worried that you've upset them. And then they respond and they try to tell you perhaps that they knew it was a joke, and it sounds to you like they think you're a fucking idiot for caring about it. And then you get into this weird cycle where every step there's like a level of miscommunication, and it kind of accumulates into this huge kind of ball of misunderstanding and tension and stress. And sometimes it can involve very personal, serious things, or awkward things, or things that can, under the stress of a acid trip, or the potential stress of an acid trip, can appear much worse than they are. I had a few experiences like this with things that in day-to-day life they wouldn't be a big thing, but they came up, they presented themselves as very, very awkward issues and were very hard to address or to communicate effectively about. So that was a big problem, which made me especially reluctant to do it, and still reluctant to do it around people I don't really know well, because I could never explain to them, and I could never, so for that reason, part of me, I started to think, I think it's better not to talk too much on it, in all honesty. As fun as it is, like, it's a difficult balance to achieve, because I think it can be really fun at first. Then when you start to get, like, really sort of, like, you start really tripping, it's hard to have a normal conversation, and even humour can become strange. And I personally found there's a certain point where it's just better to just sit and put music on, put some good music on, and just let emotions and the thoughts and the weird feelings flow through you, and that can be like a really beautiful experience. But that's not always everybody's ideal way of doing things. It's part of why, which I think I'll cover in another video, why I don't really think these are like suitable party drugs, and I don't really think their use should be encouraged as party drugs. I understand if people want to do that themselves, like, that's cool. I've probably been like a bit of a square about that in the past, and in all honesty, it's something I would probably do, but in general, I don't really think they should be promoted as such. I don't really think they should be thought of or talked about as such. I don't think psychedelics are really like suitable party drugs. I just think there's a lot of room for like sort of psychological despair and confusion and problems, and I think it's a bit of a waste of them, and I think it's kind of a bit like, I'm not like super like spiritual about them or whatever. I do feel it's almost like kind of disrespectful to the, I don't know, maybe that's a stretch too far, but I don't think, generally speaking, I don't really think they're party drugs. I don't think they're that good as party drugs. They can be, and in certain combinations, for example, like LSD and MDMA and stuff like that, like, yeah, it's incredible. And if you're in the right environment and, you know, whatever, you're a grown-up, it's up to you. But yeah, I would never advise anybody to do that, basically, is what I'm saying. So that would always happen. That was fine, you know, because again, the cool things about it, like food, you can eat on it, like towards the end. I don't really think it's a good idea to eat midway through the trip. That was something we used to do a little bit too much of as well, I think. We were always like getting takeaways and like stuffing ourselves. And again, it was not really my idea. I'm really avoiding like talking shit. And I understand all of it. But yeah, it was not my I understand when you have a certain experience and you want to like repeat that experience, and you get certain, I have that feeling, you know, there's certain things I enjoyed, for example, doing on MDMA, like just walking around outdoors and like talking to someone, and I just wanted to do that every time, and I was probably annoying because like that's not necessarily other people's preference for hanging out, but because I had such good associations with that experience, I just wanted to do that all the time, and I just wanted to keep repeating that experience because I enjoyed it so much initially, and that became my idea of how you do this drug. And I guess a similar thing was perhaps happening here. But yeah, towards the end, you know, you can eat on it, which is nice because a lot of drugs you can't really eat on. And it can be fun, like, later on to eat. Sex is, like, amazing on it. Can be a bit weird, like, especially in the early part when you're starting to trip more and more. And it's like, you're kind of like having sex, but then in your head, you're, like, having a weird trip. But it's cool. Like, it's definitely good. Like, and physically, like, yeah, it's amazing, really. Really, really good. And not in the way that, for example, like GHB and amphetamines, they can make you like really horny and stuff, but it's a bit like sort of like a lab rat being given, you know, it's just like a bit like, I don't know, a bit kind of artificial and sort of dirty, but with acid it's just like, just good, you know, just good. And it feels like, from a physical point of view, it feels like it's sort of healthy and good, but it can be a bit odd, yeah. A bit of an odd experience, especially if you're having a weird trip. But yeah, that's really good. And the duration of it, and it doesn't really have too much of an after effect, really. Like, you can feel a bit fried the next day, especially because it's very, very hard to sleep on it. But yeah, so all of that, it was, you know, the pros and cons overall, kind of worth it. It definitely would have been, had it been the right environment. Anyway, came down to this one trip, basically, that put me off doing it. One sec. Sorry, I had to check my levels and shit. Yeah, so it came down to this one trip, basically. I had always wanted to take a lot of time before every trip to kind of like be chilled out and to like meditate and to kind of just be relaxed and calm and create a good atmosphere. And I felt like the vibe you went into it with was like super important. This was years ago, by the way, and again, like I'm over this. However, that opinion was not shared. Basically, it was not a mutual feeling, and that on this particular day created quite a lot of friction prior to the trip, quite a big argument, and so we tripped, and I felt this was not the right time to be doing it. And one thing I've learned, and I'd say the biggest takeaway really for anyone watching this who's maybe yet to trip or is inexperienced with it, or just anyone, is like, it doesn't matter what the occasion is, doesn't matter how long you've been planning it, doesn't matter if it's your only weekend off, if you're not comfortable on the day and you feel it's wrong, just stop, just don't do it. Like, you should never ever trip when you feel like it might be a bad idea. I mean, you always have a little bit of fear, but if you really feel like this is a bad environment, this is the wrong setting, this is the wrong time or day, this is a bad atmosphere, don't do it. Cancel it. It's not worth it. Every really bad story I've heard, which are fairly few and far between in my opinion compared to like alcohol stories that you hear, for example, but every really bad experience I've heard of has been from somebody doing it just the wrong time, wrong place, possibly with the wrong people, and it's not worth it. Sorry, the reflection on my glasses driving me crazy again. I'm trying to stand in a way or sit in a way where you can see my eyes, but you can't. Yeah. Anyway, so we did it, and it was okay to begin with, and then well, we won't go into too much detail, basically, but it was sort of. It was fun for a little bit, and then it suddenly started to get weird, and there was no sense of like how to prevent that from escalating and how to keep things cool. And the atmosphere in the apartment and everything became very bad and very, very, very stressful and intense, and like something you would see in, I'm not going to say a David Lynch film, that's a bit too far. A crack house? No. I don't know. A slightly deranged, there was a deranged atmosphere in the apartment. It was very unpleasant to be in and to experience. And the problem was that this lasted for quite a long time. And again, I understand this. And I understand, like, you know, whatever, and I've put it into perspective now, but it was not a suitable situation, and this went on for a long time, and so had this been a few hours and then things calmed down, it would have been okay, but it wasn't really. It was a pretty prolonged, bizarre situation, and during that, I don't know how to explain what happened, and I can't even remember exactly what happened, but during that chaos, I just went further and further into this very dark place in my head, and I still can't quite understand the meaning of this, but it was like I was shown something that I didn't want to see about the universe and about the nature of life and the nature of our existence. And I'm going to turn my fucking brightness down. That might help a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Cool. About the nature of life and the nature of the universe, and it was the simplest way I could perceive it at the time, and that I can explain it now perhaps, is it was like and that's just how the universe works for eternity. and nothing can ever change that, and nothing will ever change that, and we are on some level aware of that, and everything that's happened has already happened and will happen again, and there is a certain set of ingredients, so to speak, in the universe, and they can just recreate themselves in certain ways over and over again for eternity, and there's nothing else. And in that sense, it's more meaningless than nothingness. It's more meaningless than death. There is no death. The death is life itself, and it's just back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and we're all kind of I guess maybe part of the feeling was that we're all kind of one consciousness experiencing this, and it's like hellish, like, and that we're kind of all God, and this is all just designed as a distraction from the sort of pain of like spending eternity alone, because in a sense we are like completely alone, like as individuals. Even if you have people around you who you love and care about, you are kind of alone. You don't really know that they're real. You don't know that they're not a figment of your imagination. And yeah, it's hard to explain. That's the only way I can really explain it, was that I saw the universe and my own existence in this light, and I dwelled on that for a very long time during a very unpleasant kind of external situation, and it embedded itself in my brain in a way that was, you know, it wasn't like I had a bad trip and my brain was different. I just saw the world in a way that I could not unsee. And in a weird sense, although I have no understanding of maths or science or anything really, like, it felt like it made sense. It felt like this interpretation of the universe and of the nature of existence somehow made sense to me, and it seemed very real. And it was like, yeah, that connects all the dots in a way that, you know, I don't know, eternal recurrence or eternal return is part of what this is referred to as in some places. That doesn't cover everything that I saw on this trip, but that was the gist. Kind of eternal, infinite repetition and being completely alone. And just for times during this trip, it was like the worst feeling I could ever possibly describe. And if you take your fear of death and the fact that, you know, everything you know and love will be wiped out and eventually you won't exist anymore, this is way worse than that, in all honesty. I've always been like everybody else, you know, I've had a healthy sort of fear of death and my own mortality, but this was much worse. This made me realise fear of death is nothing. Fear of death is not frightening compared to this. When you see and feel this for real, nothing is more frightening. This was like, it's beyond frightening. Frightening, there is no word in the English language that covers how unbelievably massive, and I can't even use a word to describe it. It's just, any word I use would be an understatement. But yeah, it felt like an enormous amount of information to compute, or an enormous, it was extremely unpleasant, and in a sense it kind of ruined the next like year or two of my life, I would say. Like, not all of it, but yeah, pretty badly fucked me up really. And I hate to think I was being like, I don't know, as part of me thinks like I was just being a bit of a dick about it and I could have just like pulled myself together, but it's hard to explain. It's like the opposite of religion. Do you know what I mean? You know what religion does for people? Like, that's a profound thing. That's big. That is important. And the effect that has on everything that happens in your day-to-day life, every event. You know, if you have a sort of profound and strong religious belief, a belief in God, that has a very positive and profound effect on almost everything that happens in your life. This is kind of like the reverse of that. Like, everything was coloured by this. Everything was just dead to me. Like I could still do normal stuff and have a normal day and have a laugh and whatever, but it was like there was something. It was like a piece of my soul was missing, and I could never have back what I lost that night. And everything was coloured by it, and it didn't matter what was going on. It didn't matter what a nice day it was. You know, like we moved to Brighton shortly after that. It's a beautiful city. I love Brighton, but it coloured that. You know, it was like I was a little bit dead inside from this experience, and it kind of went away, I guess. I can still sometimes see it and think about it and whatever, and I guess it's kind of, you know, in a way it's like just broadened my mind, and it's made me realise, you know, perhaps that there are worse things than death. But yeah, it went away really over time. I think I fucking talked about it a lot. It's part of why it took a while to make this video, because I feel sort of self-conscious of the fact that I talked about it quite a lot at the time, and it's not really a real problem, you know. It's not like losing a kid or going through a divorce or something, you know. It's a weird problem to have, but it was for a while kind of the biggest problem in my life. Yeah, so I was sort of self-conscious about it for that reason as well. But I talked about it a lot in my music. I did a lot of music about it. I had this album, Don't Come In Here, which I'll link in the description. Yeah, I talked about it a lot there and in other work, and still it's kind of still in like a lot of my music. It's become probably like the most recurrent theme in my work. I think that helped a lot, because you just get to a point, I don't know, yeah, you sort of talked about it a lot and whatever, and it's, you know, and I don't know if I believe it anymore. I don't feel as certain of it anymore, and I feel a bit like, I've started to feel like, well, what do I really know? You know, I'm like a dog looking at a computer, like I don't really know anything, I don't really understand anything, and that's comforting in a way, to think like I don't understand the universe, and maybe if I die and there's something after this and I become some sort of like, you know, my fucking spirit is freed and I enter some kind of crazy realm, and maybe then I'll realise and I'll say, oh, that's what it was. Oh, you know, I can't believe I thought that. That was so stupid. Or, oh, I was completely right and everything is terrifying. Or, you know, maybe everything's even worse than that. I'm about to enter the next fucking stage of hell. Who knows, you know, basically. But, like, I don't really know. And certainly in this kind of world that we're in, and this lifetime, you can't really know anything, you know? You just can't, and there's a freedom in letting go of that and accepting it. And I think that's what I've achieved to some degree, is that freedom. And now it's back to just regular fears. You know, everyone I love will die. I will die. Everything good seemingly comes to some type of end. And that's alright, really. You know, could be worse. So that's where I'm at with it. It's made me very hesitant to do acid again. At times I thought about doing it again to maybe try and like fix myself, you know. But now that I feel that I am kind of over that experience, I don't think that would be a good idea. However, I'm not opposed to doing acid again. I find it to be a bit strange. I don't fully trust it as a substance, and if you sort of personify these substances, which, like, it's quite hard not to do when you take them a lot, because they do feel like they have a life of their own and a personality and a character of their own. I see acid as someone who I don't fully trust, who I'm skeptical of, who I kind of like in a way, but who I'm quite skeptical of. And so recently I've been trying to... I did shrooms recently and enjoyed that a lot. Found it quite therapeutic and interesting and tolerable. And I'm kind of more keen to do that and to just focus on shrooms, and maybe they're more like... I don't know. I don't think they're just more natural in terms of the sort of meaningless distinction that one is sort of, you know, made in a lab and one grows in the ground. I actually get, from what I read of trip reports and stuff, shrooms, the visuals, the imagery, the thoughts and feelings, they tend to be more organic in some way, or kind of ancient or organic, or kind of a bit more, there's more of an earthy feel to it, and acid is more of a strange kind of almost digital kind of weird not existential, I don't know how to describe it. They have different feelings associated with them, and I'm keen to explore shrooms more. And acid I would like to take with MDMA more, because I did that a few times and it was amazing. But by itself, I'm not super keen to do so. I don't really feel I need to for any reason. And yeah, possible that I won't ever again for the rest of my life. I don't know. Yeah, that's all really. If you have any thoughts or feelings on any of it, by all means, please share them in the comments. Any similar experiences or whatever, really. Yeah, cool.